3 months after the competition, the Galactic Academy of Sciences was a changed place. The story of the janitor who revolutionized wormhole physics had spread across the galaxy. It was now the most famous scientific institution in known space, though not for the reasons its founders might have expected. Junho walked down the main corridor, no longer pushing a cleaning cart. He wore a simple dark blue professor's uniform now, with a small Earth symbol on the collar. Students and teachers greeted him warmly as he passed. Some still looked at him with wonder, but most had come to accept him as just another brilliant mind at the academy. He reached his destination, a new laboratory created specifically for wormhole research. Above the door, a sign read, Kim Wormhole Initiative. Junho still felt strange seeing his name displayed so prominently. Inside the lab, a team of scientists from 15 different species worked together. In the center of the room stood Su Jin, now his lead research assistant and first graduate student. She was explaining Junho's equations to a group of visitors. The key insight, she was saying, is that space-time already has natural flex points. Dr. Kim's approach doesn't force a wormhole open. It finds where the universe is already willing to bend and gently encourages it. The visitors nodded, fascinated. Among them was a group of young humans from Earth, visiting the academy for the first time. Earth had sent its brightest students after hearing about Junho's victory. Professor Kim, one of them called out when they saw him. "We've been hoping to meet you." Junho smiled and walked over. Even now he found it hard to accept such excitement about his presence. "Welcome to the academy," he said. "I hope you find it as educational as I have." "Is it true you worked as a janitor for 15 years?" asked a young woman. "Even though you were a famous physicist on Earth?" "True," Junho said. "And I learned as much in those 15 years as I did in my previous career. Sometimes watching and listening teach more than talking and doing." As Junho showed the visitors around the lab, the door opened again. Professor Dragonesa entered, her scales shimmering under the lights. The room grew quiet. Despite the changes at the academy, many still remembered how she had mocked Junho publicly. But Dragonesa had changed too. Her frill lay flat against her neck now, a sign of respect in her species. "Dr. Kim," she said formally. "May I have a moment?" Junho nodded and excused himself from the visitors. He and Dragonesa walked to a quiet corner of the lab. "Our joint paper has been accepted by the Galactic Science Journal," she said, showing him a message on her tablet. "They call it groundbreaking." Junho smiled. After the competition, Dragonesa had surprised everyone by asking to collaborate with him. Their paper combined his intuitive approach with her methodical research. "Good news," he said. "Your contributions made it much stronger." Dragonesa's frill fluttered slightly, a sign of emotion. "I want to say something, Dr. Kim. Something difficult. For me." Junho waited patiently. "I was wrong," she said finally. "Not just about you, but about humans, about how intelligence works, about many things. We all have blind spots," Junho said kindly. "When I mocked you that day in the lecture hall," Dragonesa continued, "I thought I was stating scientific fact. Now I see I was just repeating comfortable prejudices." She looked around the lab at the diverse team working together. "Your victory changed this place. Species that never collaborated are now working side by side. Problems that seemed impossible are being solved. Change was needed," Junho said. "But change is rarely comfortable." "True," Dragonesa agreed, "but necessary." She hesitated, then added, "The Academy Board met yesterday. They've asked me to tell you their decision." "Oh?" Junho raised his eyebrows. "Director Lee is retiring next year. They want you to replace him as head of the Academy." Junho's eyes widened in surprise. "Me? But I've only been a professor for 3 months." "And a student of the Academy for 15 years, Dragonesa countered. "No one knows this place better than you do, from the highest lab to the lowest storage room." Before Junho could respond, alarms suddenly blared throughout the lab. Red lights flashed overhead. "The prototype!" Su Jin shouted from across the room. She was standing next to a large machine. their first attempt to create a stable miniature wormhole. Everyone rushed over. The machine was humming loudly, vibrating on its platform. Displays showed energy levels rising rapidly. "It's becoming unstable," one scientist said. "The containment field is failing." "Shut it down," another called. "We can't," Sujin said, typing frantically on the control panel. "It's not responding. If the prototype failed catastrophically, it could create a dangerous surge of energy." People began backing away. Junho stepped forward, studying the machine calmly. "It's not failing," he said quietly. "It's working. Just not as we expected." He pointed to one of the displays. "Look at the quantum signature. It's stabilizing at a higher energy level." "That's impossible," said a scientist. "The equations don't support that." "The equations are incomplete," Junho said. He picked up a stylus and quickly wrote a new formula on a nearby screen. "Space-time isn't just bending, it's resonating, like a musical note finding its perfect pitch." Dragonesa moved beside him, studying his work. "He's right," she said after a moment. "The mathematics support this. We just never considered this possibility." Together they adjusted the machine's settings. The alarms stopped. The red lights faded. The humming settled into a steady, gentle tone. In the center of the machine, a small point of light appeared. It expanded slowly, forming a perfect circle about the size of a coin. Through it, they could see somewhere else, a different part of the laboratory, visible through an impossible window in space. The room fell silent in awe. "We did it," Sujin whispered. "A stable wormhole." "Not just stable," Junho said, checking the readings. "Self-sustaining. It should remain open indefinitely with minimal power." The implications were enormous. With this technology, travel between distant stars would become as simple as walking through a doorway. The galaxy would never be the same. Director Lee arrived, drawn by the alarms. He looked at the tiny wormhole, then at Junho. "When I offered you the janitor position 15 years ago," he said with a smile, "I never imagined this outcome." "Nor did I," Junho admitted. "The Academy Board's offer," Dragonesa prompted. "Will you accept it?" Junho looked around the room, at the humans from Earth looking at him with pride, at Sujin, whose belief in him had started this journey, at Dragonesa, who had found the courage to change her deepest beliefs, at the tiny wormhole that would transform the galaxy. "I will," he said, "on one condition." "Name it," said Director Lee. "That the Academy create a new program," Junho said. "One that seeks out hidden talent from all backgrounds, all species, all walks of life. We must never again overlook brilliance because it comes in an unexpected package." Director Lee nodded. "I believe the board will agree. What should we call this program?" Junho thought for a moment, then smiled. "The Janitor Initiative." The room filled with laughter and applause. Even Dragonesa joined in, her frill extended, in happiness. As the celebration continued around him, Junho stood quietly by the wormhole, watching the impossible doorway in space. From janitor to academy director, from invisible to celebrated, his journey had been as unexpected as the wormhole itself. He thought of all the other hidden geniuses out there, the taxi drivers and farmers, the cleaners and cooks, the ordinary, people with extraordinary minds just waiting for their chance. Soon they would have it, and the galaxy would never be the same. The end. The Galactic Academy of Sciences stood tall and proud on the artificial planet of Nova Educatio. Its gleaming towers reached toward the 3 moons that hung in the purple sky. Inside these towers, the smartest beings from across the galaxy taught, studied, and made discoveries that changed lives on thousands of worlds. Professor Dragonesa walked down the main hall with her head held high. Her green scales shimmered under the lights, and the frill around her neck expanded slightly with pride. Students and other teachers moved out of her way, some bowing their heads in respect. "Good morning, Professor," said a young reptilian student, his scales not yet fully hardened with age. "Morning," Dragonesa replied without slowing her pace. She was the head of xenobiology at the academy. the most prestigious position in her field in the entire galaxy. Her research on cross-species DNA had earned her 3 Galactic Science Awards. Everyone knew her name. Almost everyone, that is. In a side corridor, Kim Junho pushed his cleaning cart quietly. His gray uniform blended with the walls, making him nearly invisible to the busy students rushing past. Junho was human, from Earth, a planet that had only joined the Galactic Union 20 years ago. At 45 years old, his black hair was starting to show streaks of silver, and fine lines marked the corners of his eyes. Junho kept his head down as he worked. He wiped floors that were already clean and emptied trash bins that were barely used. The Academy liked things perfect, and he made sure they stayed that way. What the Academy did not know was that Junho was not just a janitor. Back on Earth, he had been Dr. Kim Junho, a brilliant physicist whose theories on quantum field manipulation had pushed science forward by decades. But when political enemies rose to power, he had been forced to flee with nothing but the clothes on his back and his knowledge in his head. Now, he was just the human janitor who few people bothered to look at, let alone speak to. As Junho turned a corner, he nearly bumped into Professor Dragonesa. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, her frill expanding fully in anger. "I am very sorry, Professor," Junho said softly, bowing his head. Dragonesa looked him up and down, her vertical pupils narrowing. "Humans," she muttered, loud enough for him to hear. Always in the way, Junho said nothing, just stepped aside with his cart. He had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. Later that day, the Academy's largest lecture hall was packed full. Today was Professor Dragonesa's annual special lecture on evolutionary superiority among galactic species. It was a favorite among students, especially those from species that usually ranked high in her charts. Humans never ranked high. Junho was cleaning the back of the hall when students began to pour in. He should have finished earlier, but a spill in the cafeteria had put him behind schedule. Now he tried to make himself even more invisible, working quickly in the shadows. The lights dimmed except for those on the stage. Professor Dragonesa walked, out to thunderous applause. Her scales seemed to glow under the spotlight, and her frill was fully extended in a display of confidence. "Welcome, future leaders of galactic science," she began, her voice carrying easily through the hall. "Today, we continue our examination of evolutionary advantages and how they translate to cognitive capabilities." Behind her, a large screen lit up with charts and diagrams. She tapped on her control pad, but nothing happened. She tapped again, harder, but the display remained frozen. "Technical difficulties," she said with a tight smile. "If someone from maintenance could assist." No one moved. The regular tech staff wasn't in the hall. From his corner, Junho saw the problem immediately. The projection system was one he had cleaned around many times, and he knew it well. The professor had simply activated the wrong protocol. After an awkward silence, Junho quietly made his way forward, keeping close to the wall. When he reached the stage, he bowed slightly. "I might be able to help, Professor," he said quietly. Professor Dragonesa looked at him with surprise, then barely hidden disgust. "You? What would a human janitor know about Academy technology?" Nevertheless, she stepped aside. Junho moved to the control panel and made a few quick adjustments. The screen behind them came to life, displaying the correct presentation. Instead of thanking him, Professor Dragonesa laughed. The sound was cold and sharp. "Well, even the simplest creatures can sometimes be useful," she said loudly. The audience laughed with her. "Perhaps this can be a living example for today's lecture." She turned to face the students, gesturing at Junho as he tried to step back into the shadows. Humans represent an interesting case study in galactic evolution. They achieved space travel despite their obvious limitations. Their brains evolved on a planet with minimal challenges, resulting in, she paused for effect, barely evolved primates who should stick to menial tasks suited for their limited cognitive capabilities. The lecture hall erupted in laughter. Some students even pointed at Junho, who kept his face carefully blank as he bowed slightly and returned to his cart. "As we can see," Professor Dragonesa continued, Natural selection has created a clear hierarchy of intelligence across the galaxy. Some species are naturally suited to lead in scientific discovery, while others, she glanced toward Junho, are better suited to cleaning up after us. More laughter filled the hall. Junho quietly wheeled his cart out of the room, his face showing nothing of the thoughts racing through his mind. Outside the hall, a young woman with short black hair and determined eyes was waiting. Her academy uniform had the blue trim of a graduate student. The name tag read Park Soo-jin. "That was awful," she said as Junho emerged. "The way she spoke to you." Junho looked up, surprised that someone had noticed or cared. "It is not important," he said softly. "It is important," Soo-jin insisted. "I'm Soo-jin. I'm from Earth too, though I was born on the colony on Mars. My grandparents were from Korea, like you seem to be." Junho nodded. "Yes, I am Kim Junho." Soo-jin walked alongside him as he pushed his cart down the hall. What she said about humans was wrong. Her entire theory is flawed. Species don't evolve to be superior or inferior. They evolve to survive in their environments. Junho glanced at her, a small smile forming on his lips. "You are right, of course. The professor's view is limited by her own experience. The way you fixed that system was impressive," Soo-jin said. "You seem to know exactly what to do." Junho shrugged. "Simple problem. The display was set to receive from the wrong input channel." Soo-jin studied him carefully. "You know a lot about tech for a janitor." "We all have our pasts," Junho said quietly, "and our reasons for the paths we choose." They reached a junction in the corridor. Soo-jin needed to go to her next class, but she hesitated. Professor Dragonesa's mockery was wrong, she said firmly. One day, she'll learn that humans have more to offer than she thinks. Junho smiled, a real smile this time that reached his eyes. Perhaps or perhaps not. Either way, the floor still needs cleaning. As Soo-jin walked away, Junho continued pushing his cart. If she had looked back, she might have seen him stop by a research terminal in the hall. While no one was watching, his fingers flew over the keys, accessing advanced physics research with the speed and confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was looking for. Then, hearing footsteps, he quickly returned to mopping the already spotless floor. Once again, just the invisible janitor that no one thought twice about. A week after the lecture incident, the halls of the Galactic Academy buzzed with excitement. Bright digital signs appeared on every wall, announcing the biggest event of the academic year, the Galactic Problem-Solving Competition. Junho read one of the signs as he cleaned the windows nearby. The competition happened every 5 years. Teams and individuals from all over the galaxy would try to solve problems that had stumped scientists for decades. The final challenge this year was to create a model for stable wormhole creation, something no one had ever done successfully. As Junho wiped the glass, he heard familiar voices approaching. He kept his head down, focusing on his work. "This competition will be the perfect chance to show everyone the true hierarchy of galactic intelligence," said Professor Dragonesa to the small group of teachers walking with her. "My species has won 3 of the last 4 competitions." "Will you enter again this year, Professor?" asked one of her colleagues, a tall, blue-skinned being with 4 arms. "Of course," Dragonesa said. "The final challenge is about wormhole creation. My research team has been working on that problem for years. We are close to a breakthrough." The group stopped near where Junho was cleaning. They barely noticed him, just another part of the academy's background, like the walls or the floors. "I heard the academy is allowing anyone to enter this year," said another teacher, his antenna twitching with disapproval. "Even students from the newer species." Dragonesa laughed, the sound sharp and cold. "Let them try. Some problems require minds that have evolved over millions of years of advanced civilization. A species that only discovered space travel a few centuries ago has no chance, especially humans." She looked directly at Junho now, noticing him for the first time. "No offense meant to our cleaning staff, of course," she said with fake politeness. "We all have our places in the galaxy." The group laughed and continued down the hall. Junho remained silent, but his hand tightened slightly on the cleaning cloth. Later that day, Junho was emptying trash bins in the graduate student lounge when Sujin entered. She was carrying several large data tablets and looked stressed. "Hello, Mr. Kim," she said, noticing him immediately. Unlike most people at the academy, she always acknowledged him. "Hello, Miss Park," he replied with a small bow. "You look worried." Sujin dropped her tablets on a table and sighed. "I'm trying to decide if I should enter the competition. Professor Dragonesa told our class that no human has ever made it past the first round." Junho continued his work, saying nothing for a moment, then he asked quietly, "Do you believe her?" "I don't want to," Sujin said. "But the math for the final challenge, that it's beyond anything I've studied. Look." She turned one of her tablets so Junho could see it. The screen showed complex equations and three-dimensional models of space-time. Junho glanced at the screen, then looked away quickly. But not before Sujin noticed something in his eyes, a flash of understanding, maybe even excitement. "You understood what you just saw," she said, not as a question, but as a fact. Junho shook his head. "I'm just a janitor, Miss Park." "No," Sujin said firmly. "There's more to you than that. The way you fixed the projection system last week and now this. You know advanced physics." Junho was quiet for a long time, then he said, "Even if that were true, what would it matter?" Sujin moved closer to him. "You should enter the competition." Junho actually laughed at this, something Sujin had never heard him do before. A janitor in the galactic competition? Professor Dragonesa would use that as final proof of human inferiority. "Not if you won," Sujin said, her eyes bright with the idea. "Think about it. You could enter anonymously. The first rounds are all done through the Academy's computer system. No one would know who you are until the final round." Junho shook his head again, but with less certainty. "I have not done serious scientific work in many years." "But you could," Sujin pressed. "I saw how you looked at those equations. This matters to you." Junho was quiet again, thinking. Finally, he said, "I will consider it, Miss Park. Now, I must finish my work." He moved to leave, but Sujin called after him. "The registration deadline is tomorrow at midnight," she said, "and my friends call me Sujin." Junho gave her a small smile. "Then I will consider it, Sujin." That night, after his shift ended, Junho sat alone in his small living unit on the lower level of the academy. These rooms were given to service staff, small but clean and comfortable. The academy took care of its workers, even if it didn't respect them much. On his simple desk sat an old data tablet, one he rarely used. He turned it on now and began to type, accessing the academy's scientific database. As a staff member, he had basic access, though nothing like what the students and faculty enjoyed. Still, it was enough to read about the competition and its challenges. The first rounds involved solving increasingly difficult problems in various fields: physics, biology, chemistry, mathematics. The final challenge, the wormhole model, was described in detail. Junho read everything carefully, his mind working in ways it hadn't in years. Old knowledge came back to him, ideas he had explored on Earth before he had to flee. He began to take notes, his handwriting quick and sure. At 11:58 p.m., just 2 minutes before the deadline, a new entry appeared in the competition database. The entrant was listed simply as Earth participant. No name, no credentials, just a planet of origin. The next morning, a notification appeared on the main Academy announcement board. The first round of the competition would begin in 3 days. Over 200 participants had registered, representing 37 different species from across the galaxy. Professor Dragonesa stood in front of the board, reading the list with satisfaction. Her name was at the top, as one of the most decorated previous winners. Her eyes scanned down the list of participants, noting potential rivals. When she reached the entry for Earth participant, she smirked. "How brave," she said to a colleague, standing nearby. "A human entering the competition. I wonder if they'll make it past the first problem." Her colleague, A gentle fish-like being with large, thoughtful eyes said, "It takes courage to try, regardless of the outcome." "Courage, or foolishness," Dragonesa replied. "We'll soon find out which." 3 days later, the first round began. Participants had 24 hours to solve a complex problem involving quantum field fluctuations in multiple dimensions. Jun-ho sat in his room after his regular cleaning shift, working through the night on his old tablet. The solution came, to him just before dawn, an elegant approach that no one at the academy had considered before. When the results were announced the next day, 170 participants had successfully solved the first problem. Earth participant was among them, with one of the fastest completion times. The second round eliminated half the remaining participants. The third round cut the field to just 40. Earth participant solved each problem, often hours before anyone else. By the fourth round, only 10 participants remained. Professor Dragonesa was still in the competition, but she was no longer in first place. The mysterious human participant had taken the lead, solving each problem with approaches that the judges called revolutionary and brilliantly simple. Rumors spread through the academy. Who was this human? A secret genius sent from Earth? A professor from one of the human colonies? No one guessed it might be the quiet janitor who cleaned their halls every day. As the competition reached its final stages, Professor Dragonesa grew increasingly angry and curious. She demanded that the academy officials reveal the identity of Earth participant. They refused, citing the rules that allowed anonymous entry until the final round. "The final round will be held in the Grand Hall," announced Director Lee Do-hyun, the head of the academy and one of the few humans in a position of authority. "All finalists must appear in person to present their solutions." As he said this, his eyes scanned the crowd that had gathered for the announcement. For just a moment, they rested on Jun-ho, who stood at the back of the room with his cleaning cart. Did the director know? Jun-ho wondered. Or was it just coincidence? Either way, soon everyone would know the truth. The janitor would step into the spotlight, ready to show the galaxy what humans could really do. The day of the final round arrived. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Academy was packed with students, teachers, and visitors from across the galaxy. The 10 finalists would present their solutions to the famous wormhole problem today. Jun-ho arrived, early, not as a competitor but as a janitor. He cleaned the stage and made sure everything was perfect. No one gave him a second look as he worked. To them, he was just doing his job. "Nervous?" a voice asked behind him. Jun-ho turned to see Soo-jin, standing there, a small smile on her face. "Should I be?" he asked quietly. "You're about to shock everyone in this room," she said. "I'd be terrified." Jun-ho thought about it. "I feel calm," he said. "After all these years of being invisible, there is a strange peace in finally being seen." Soo-jin nodded. "I'll be in the front row. Good luck." As she walked away, Jun-ho finished his cleaning and slipped backstage. There he changed from his gray janitor uniform into a simple black suit he had borrowed from the academy's Lost and Found. It was slightly too big, but it would have to do. At exactly noon, Director Lee Do-hyun took the stage. The tall Korean man had a commanding presence that quieted the crowd immediately. "Welcome to the final round of the Galactic Problem-Solving Competition," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Today, our 10 finalists will present their solutions to the most challenging scientific problem of our time, creating a stable wormhole model." The crowd applauded. Cameras floated around the room, broadcasting the event to billions across the galaxy. "First, let me introduce our finalists," the director continued. One by one, the finalists walked onto the stage. Professor Dragonesa came out third, her scales gleaming and her frill extended in pride. The crowd cheered loudly for her. Finally, only one name remained. And our final competitor, who has led the scoring throughout the competition, Earth participant, announced Director Lee. The crowd grew quiet, curious to finally see the mysterious human who had outperformed everyone else. The door at the side of the stage remained closed for a moment. Then it opened, and Jun-ho walked, Out. The silence in the hall grew deeper. Then whispers spread like wildfire. The janitor? Is this a joke? That's impossible. Professor Dragonesa stepped forward, her frill flaring with anger. This is an outrage, she hissed. This human is a janitor. He cleans the floors. He has no scientific training, no credentials. Director Lee raised his hand for silence. The rules of the competition are clear. Anyone may enter, regardless of position or background. Earth participant, or should I say Mr. Kim Jun-ho, has earned his place here by solving every problem correctly and faster than any other competitor. He must have cheated, Dragonesa insisted. There is no way a human janitor could outperform a draconian scientist. The crowd was getting louder now, some agreeing with Dragonesa, others defending the rules of the competition. Director Lee raised his hands again. Silence, please. There is no evidence of cheating. All submissions were carefully checked. Mr. Kim's solutions were not only correct, but showed remarkable insight. Jun-ho stood quietly through all of this, his face calm. When the director nodded to him, he stepped forward to the microphone. I understand Professor Dragonesa's confusion, he said, his voice soft but clear. How could someone who cleans floors possibly understand complex science? But perhaps the floor is not the only thing I've been studying all these years. A murmur ran through the crowd. Director Lee looked at Jun-ho with a strange expression, almost as if he knew something others didn't. Mr. Kim, he said, would you be willing to share more about your background with us? Jun-ho hesitated, then nodded slowly. If it will help the competition proceed. Director Lee turned to the audience. With Mr. Kim's permission, I can tell you that our janitor is not just any human. On Earth, he was known as Dr. Kim Jun-ho, one of the leading physicists in quantum field theory. His work on subquantum particles was groundbreaking. The hall erupted in shock. Students turned to each other, whispering furiously. Some were already searching for information on their tablets. Professor Dragonesa's frill flattened against her neck in surprise. If that's true, why is he working as a janitor? Director Lee looked at Jun-ho, who nodded again, giving permission to continue. Dr. Kim fled Earth during a political conflict 15 years ago, the director explained. He came to the academy seeking safety and anonymity. He chose to work as a janitor to avoid attention. And all this time, Soo-jin called out from the front row, unable to contain herself. The academy has been teaching his theories in physics classes without knowing he was here. More chaos broke out in the crowd. Professor Dragonesa looked stunned, her usual confidence shaken. Is this true? She asked Jun-ho directly. For the first time, Jun-ho smiled fully. Check your own textbook, Professor. Chapter 7 covers my work on quantum field manipulation, though it does get a few details wrong. Director Lee called for order again. Fascinating as this revelation is, we have a competition to complete. Each finalist will present their solution to the wormhole problem. They will have 30 minutes to explain their approach. The judges will then select a winner. He looked at Dragonesa, who was still staring at Jun-ho with confusion and growing anger. Professor Dragonesa, as the most decorated previous winner, would you like to present first? Dragonesa pulled herself together, her frill expanding again with renewed confidence. Yes, she said, and I think after my presentation, there will be no doubt about who the real scientist is here. She stepped to the center of the stage as Jun-ho and the other finalists moved to seats at the side. For the next 30 minutes, Dragonesa presented her solution. It was impressive, using cutting-edge mathematics and physics. Her approach involved creating a quantum tunnel between 2 points, in space stabilized by exotic matter. The judges nodded in approval as she spoke. When she finished, the crowd applauded loudly. Dragonesa looked at Jun-ho with a smug expression. The other finalists presented next, each offering different approaches to the wormhole problem. Some were creative, others more traditional, but none seemed better than Dragonesa's solution. Finally, it was Jun-ho's turn. He walked to the center of the stage as whispers followed him. The hall grew quiet, everyone curious about what the janitor scientist would say. Instead of using the large display screen like the others, Junho simply pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket. On it were a few equations written by hand. "My solution is simple," he said, his voice still quiet but stronger now. "While others have tried to force space-time to bend using massive amounts of energy, I propose working with the natural flexibility that already exists in the universe." He held up the paper. The cameras zoomed in, projecting the equations onto the large screens around the hall. "These 5 equations," Junho continued, "describe a method to create a stable wormhole using just 1/10 of the energy of previous models. It doesn't fight against space-time, it dances with it." The judges leaned forward, studying the equations with growing excitement. One of them, an old being with glowing eyes, actually gasped. Professor Dragonesa stared at the equations, her eyes widening as she understood their implications. That's not possible," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Not only is it possible," Junho said, "but I believe it could be built with technology we already have. The reason no one found this solution before is that everyone was looking in the wrong direction. Sometimes the simplest answer is hard to see when you're convinced the answer must be complex." As Junho explained his solution further, the atmosphere in the hall changed. The initial shock and disbelief turned to wonder and excitement. Even those who didn't understand the science could feel that something important was happening. When Junho finished his presentation, the hall was completely silent for 3 seconds. Then everyone began talking at once. The judges huddled together, discussing urgently. Director Lee had to call for order several times before the noise died down. "The judges will now retire to make their decision," he announced. "We will have the results in 1 hour." As the finalists left the stage, Junho found himself surrounded by students and teachers, all asking questions at once. For the first time in years, people were looking at him, really seeing him. In the corner of the room, Professor Dragonesa watched, her face unreadable. The janitor she had mocked was now the center of attention, and nothing at the academy would ever be the same again. While the judges deliberated, Junho found a quiet corner away from the crowd. After years of being invisible, all the attention made him uncomfortable. Sujin found him there, sitting alone with a cup of tea. "You should be out there," she said, sitting beside him. "Everyone wants to meet the famous Dr. Kim." Junho shook his head. "I am still just Junho, the same person who cleaned the floors this morning." "You won't be cleaning floors anymore," Sujin said. "After today, everything changes." Junho looked at his tea. "Perhaps, but the work was honest, and it gave me time to think." Sujin studied him carefully. "Your solution was amazing. How did you think of it when everyone else was looking in other directions?" Junho smiled slightly. "That is the advantage of being a janitor. No one expects anything from you, so you are free to think differently." Before Sujin could respond, a commotion at the door caught their attention. Professor Dragonesa entered the room, her scales darker with emotion. She saw Junho and walked directly toward him, pushing past students who tried to speak to her. Junho stood as she approached, his face calm but alert. "Professor?" he said with a small bow. Dragonesa stood before him, her tall form towering over the human. For a long moment she said nothing, just studied him with her vertical pupil eyes. 15 years, she finally said. "You've been here 15 years watching us teach your theories, listening to me talk about human limitations. And you said nothing." Junho nodded. "I had my reasons." "Why reveal yourself now?" she asked. "Why enter the competition?" Junho glanced at Sujin, then back to Dragonesa. "Sometimes a door opens and you must choose whether to walk through it or stay in the shadows." Dragonesa's frill fluttered with agitation. "Your solution? I've been studying it for the past hour. It's elegant. I would never have approached the problem that way." This was as close to a compliment as the proud professor had ever given a human. Junho acknowledged it with a nod. "Different perspectives can lead to different solutions," he said. "That is the value of diversity in science." "Are you saying humans have a different way of thinking that gives them an advantage?" Dragonesa asked, a hint of her old defensiveness returning. "Not better," Junho clarified. just different. Humans evolved on a planet with rapid changes and many threats. We had to learn to make intuitive leaps, to see patterns quickly, to adapt. Your species evolved in a more stable environment, allowing for careful, methodical thinking over longer periods. Dragonesa considered this. So you're saying both approaches have value? Exactly, Junho said. The greatest scientific advances often come when different perspectives work together. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime. The judges had reached their decision. Everyone began moving back to the grand hall. As Junho walked toward the hall, he noticed something strange. His janitor's cart sat in the corner where he had left it that morning. He stopped and looked at it, remembering all the years it had been his companion. On impulse, he walked over and straightened the cleaning supplies, arranging them neatly as he had always done. Some habits are hard to break, said a voice behind him. Director Lee stood there, watching with a knowing smile. You knew who I was, Junho said. It wasn't a question. The director nodded. When you first applied for the janitor position, I recognized your name from my studies. I wondered why a brilliant physicist would want to clean floors, but I respected your wish for privacy. Thank you for that, Junho said. It's time, the director said, gesturing toward the grand hall. Ready to stop being invisible? Junho took a deep breath. I'm not sure. Too late now, the director said with a kind smile. The universe has other plans for you. Inside the grand hall, the crowd had grown even larger. News of the janitor scientist had spread throughout the academy and beyond. The 10 finalists sat on the stage with Junho and Professor Dragonesa at opposite ends. Director Lee took the center of the stage. The judges have reached their decision, he announced. Before I reveal the winner, I want to remind everyone that this competition is about advancing our understanding of the universe. All the finalists have contributed valuable ideas. He opened a sealed envelope. The winner of this year's galactic problem-solving competition with a revolutionary approach to stable wormhole creation is Dr. Kim Junho of Earth. The hall erupted in applause and cheers. Students jumped to their feet, especially the human students who had never seen one of their own win such a prestigious award. Sujin cheered loudest of all, tears streaming down her face. Junho walked to the center of the stage. The applause continued for several minutes before he could speak. Thank you, he said simply when the noise finally died down. I accept this honor with gratitude and humility. He looked out at the audience, then at his fellow finalists. Science is not about individual glory. It is about questions that drive us to look deeper into the universe. It is about curiosity that knows no species or rank. He turned to Professor Dragonesa. Some of you may wonder why I remained silent for so long, why I chose to be a janitor when I could have been a professor. The answer is simple. I needed time to heal, to think, and to observe. Sometimes the best view of a problem comes from the ground, not from the top. Junho held up the award, a crystal sphere containing a miniature galaxy. This solution would not exist if I had not spent years watching how this academy works, seeing the brilliant minds here struggle with problems, learning from your approaches even as I formed my own. He looked at his janitor's uniform hanging backstage. There is no shame in honest work, whatever it might be. There is only shame in believing that someone's work defines their worth or their mind. The audience was silent now, listening intently. My solution to the wormhole problem came because I approached it differently. Not better, just differently. Earth is young in the galactic community. We have much to learn from older species, but perhaps we also have something to offer. A fresh perspective, a different way of seeing. Director Lee stepped forward. Dr. Kim's solution will now be the focus of a new research initiative here at the Academy. We believe it could lead to working wormhole technology within 5 years. More cheers filled the hall. The implications were enormous. Wormhole travel would revolutionize space exploration and connect the galaxy as never before. As the ceremony ended, professors and students rushed forward to speak with Junho. He answered their questions patiently, explaining his ideas with the same calm he had shown as a janitor. In the back of the hall, a group of service staff, the cleaners, maintenance workers, and kitchen staff who kept the academy running, stood, watching. They wore their uniforms proudly now, heads held higher than before. If a janitor could change the galaxy, who knew what other great minds might be working among them? Professor Dragonesa watched it all from the edge of the stage. Her old certainties had been shaken, her view of the universe and its species fundamentally changed. She had a choice to make now. Resist this new understanding or embrace it and grow. Slowly, she moved through the crowd toward Junho, ready to take the first step on a new path.